So, hi everyone. Good evening or morning, whatever time you guys are viewing this podcast, and welcome to the seventh episode of our AI Republic podcast. So, we're super excited to again get back with you this week to talk about AI news, talk about current events, issues, and to just talk about anything and everything AI. So, I'm joined by my two very awesome co-hosts, Carlo and Doc. How are you both doing today?
Not bad, thanks. Lots of.
I'm on the road, but otherwise not too bad.
Are you Amber?
I'm doing well as well. Super excited. I think we have a bunch of super cool topics today. We'll be focusing a lot on AI and education. Very hot topic. Doc just had an interview earlier about this today, and we'll also be, I guess, reviewing AI and different image and video generation tools for you guys today. But of course, we can't do that without getting started on news and current events. So we actually have a lot of news this week compared to last week. We have a bunch of like stuff that came out about AI. So I guess in the first topic, just looking at AI risks and ethics in voice and images, one of the articles that I found really interesting, that the three of us were talking about over chat was about actors' license voices for AI ads. So let me just show you guys or remind you guys what that is. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah, so
Yep.
basically summary, like we were talking over the past few episodes, we were talking about um AI for voice and how that could be a risk, how it was causing deep fakes, and also how different types of artists, whether they be in voice, whether they be in more traditional arts, were fighting for and objecting AI, like in terms of like their rights and the copyright issues. So I think this kind of changes up the conversation a bit because there is an actors union called SAG-AFTRA, and it's reached an agreement with Narrative to license AI generated replicas of these voice actors' voices, right? So this is really interesting. I guess before we dive into this, when you guys read this, or I guess Carlo, when you sent this to us, what were your first thoughts or like initial reactions to this somewhat shift in the discussion of licensing and copyrights in AI?
I mean, I think it's going to be a defensible business model for future foundational models, to have licensed content before they can start training anything. I think it's a bit late because there's already good AI out there for voice cloning. And but to be fair, 11 Labs, which is the biggest, the most popular and probably the best voice cloning model out there that's commercially available. Um, they do have a marketplace for voice actors, so you can record your voice, and then if someone uses it, you get paid. Um, but I think it's a bit late, but I think SAG-AFTRA is probably the biggest actors union in the world, right? They went famously on strike last year for like 3 months or something. And I think this is them dipping their toe into like what does this look like? What are the implications business wise, and how will artists get paid based on that? But I think this is a good step forward. But I do think this has to be the future of um, generative AI, right? Like I think whether it's voice or images or your likeliness or your fashion style or whatever, everything will have to be licensed out to people instead of people getting paid to do each piece of work.
Yeah, I
Ako,
agree.
very bearish on this because remember how YouTube is already struggling keeping track of copyrighted music. Dito,
Mm-hmm.
you're means YouTube's gonna start, you know, flagging copyrighted voices.
Yeah.
So that means pretty much every other content you see, how people like the people doing movie reviews. Wala na yun. They're not going to be able to post anything anymore. Or or the people who do mashups or shorts based on movie clips. Wala
Yeah.
na yan lahat. So I don't know. I don't know how they're going to enforce all of this effectively.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Doc. And to what you mentioned also, Carlo, I mean, when I was reading this, I thought, okay, great. At least people are getting paid, or like voice actors are getting paid in some way now. There's somewhat parang a business model that can actually help them. Maybe they're trying to reach a middle ground, right? But then, yeah, to Doc's point, same din naman on TikTok. There was a point when I think they had a disagreement, if I remember correctly. They had a disagreement with a big like music licensing company, or a big music company, and basically all of the music on TikTok got removed. So now you have, what they do is they like do quote unquote sped ups, or like speed ups. It's like the same song but like sped up like 2x, 3x speed. And those don't get removed as your sound, right? So in terms of implementation, yeah, that's interesting how that would work. And then on the flip side, I'm also seeing like on TikTok, sometimes the actual artist, like the singer or songwriter who writes the song, they actually get the audio removed because of these copyright issues, even if they're the ones who wrote the song. So I wonder if a similar thing could happen in terms of, voice acting in ads. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think, this just gives artists grounds for suing somebody for using their voices. It
Yeah.
doesn't, it's gonna be super hard to enforce in terms of like having to analyze all of the platforms for whether their voice is used or not. But let's say like Scarlett Johansson, right? Her the OpenAI demo from a couple of months ago sounded too much like her. Um, and now she has kind of grounds for it and grounds to like charge for it, right? Um, but yeah, kind of interesting. But yeah, I think it'll be almost impossible to uh to police everything.
Yeah.
But I think if like you find something that sounds like you have some grounds at least if you're part of this union.
Yeah, Doc, what are your thoughts to add on to what Carlo mentioned on just the legislation and implications of this, move forward, right? It's happening in the US. Do you think the rest of the world will follow suit, or what does this mean in your opinion for AI in general?
I think the ultimate power will be on the platforms themselves, like Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. Because
Mm-hmm.
even if you set up all these mga laws and rules, like you saw what happened to Canada when a law was passed requiring tama ba Carlo, parang newspapers to get compensated for the news that
Yeah.
was being shared on other and Facebook just decided to stop sharing news in Canada. Parang let's just shut it down.
Yeah.
So that's what's gonna happen if this thing is required. Facebook's just gonna stop allowing everyone to share anything, and that'll be the collapse of their content and advertising model. Diba? So I feel that I'm very bearish about how this is gonna pan out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really good point. And yeah, go ahead, Carlo.
Sorry, just to add to that, I think it's one thing for the publishers, or sorry, the platforms to be able to police this, because you're right, they're just gonna not do it, right? So like for example, if you take this to the nth degree, one of the big news this weekend is that the Telegram CEO just got arrested in France because France is accusing him of having a platform that doesn't like help with any with curbing any illegal activities. So people are doing like drug deals or like I don't know, human trafficking was what they're alleging, right, on Telegram. But I think the platforms are one thing, and they're gonna just not want to deal with legal stuff in different countries, right? But I do think there's a future business model in this for actors, right? So, for example, like I spoke to, what was this, 3 years ago, this is during the pandemic. I spoke to one of the most famous actresses here in the Philippines about taking her likeness and like, can I just, can you just license this out for everyone? You can have a deep fake of your voice, your image, so you don't have to do product photography anymore. And she was doing this like photo shoot for since like 5 a.m. until I spoke with her at 4 p.m. and she was still doing it, right? You don't have to do like advertising anymore. You could just like license out your face to everything, and then your job becomes one, managing making sure that you get paid for all of those. Two, getting those deals, and three, just like building your own brand, however you want to, right? And then everyone can just kind of license it out. And I think people just aren't there yet, right? I think companies aren't there yet. I think agencies aren't there yet. The talent themselves are not there yet. Like it's still a very new business model, and it's kind of funny. Like everybody wants to be ahead, but nobody wants to be first, right? But I think this is going to be uh, the start of something bigger. But again, like voice is going to be hard to police.
Yeah, I really like a lot of what you both mentioned there, and also just wanted to kind of share this part of the article, or I guess like of the Perplexity news article, right? So the voice actors do get some benefits and some rights in this deal. So there are a few key aspects that Carlo you mentioned, right? So actors can set their own preferences. Like you don't need to be put on a project that you feel is not aligned with your brand. For example, if it does a type of like advertisement that's maybe I don't know, like R18, or it's just like something different from your niche, you don't have to take it. And then you also there are also minimum rates established for compensation. So I think that's like a big part in terms of um the entertainment and just like arts industry. It's really hard to get compensated appropriately, and now opening up the industry to AI, right? Because they're not manually doing everything one by one, they're not retaking the lines one by one. How would that affect compensation, right? Since it might be more efficient for them. Um, I was thinking about how, their the companies or their clients would respond to that. So I guess it's reassuring here to see that there is a baseline for compensation. And what I also really liked about this is this point. So narrative is required to delete an actor's digital voice replica, and any recordings if they choose to leave the platform. I think that's so important because even now with social media, they say they delete your stuff when you leave and delete, but do they actually? And even when they do delete it, it does take a while. So I really appreciated the fact that they included that in the deal as well. Um, so we talked a little bit about the roles of legislation, whether we think legislation would be effective, but kind of taking a step back and looking at AI voice cloning, or looking at that bigger discussion. Do you think AI voice cloning can benefit the entertainment industry while addressing some of these ethical concerns we talked about, like deep fakes, for example, and then just fairness and bias in the industry? Like, how do you think that those two things would come into play, right? Like benefiting the voice actors while ensuring that we're also cognizant of any ethical concerns.
I mean, honestly, there's
Yeah.
so much of the um voice acting, let's keep it to that, right? It's trying to mimic another voice from something else, right? So like like all these movie trailers, like Doc, when you and I were growing up, right? Like imagine a world where blah 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 blah. Like that's always, I don't know if it's the same voice actor, but like there's a lot of people trying to do that voice, right? So I don't know. I think there's going to be benefits, and also it's going to make it easier to get a generic voice, which is I think a lot of what a lot of projects call for. um but yeah, I don't know. It's just a matter of time. You can't like, yeah, this is just another one of those things where you can't unmake soup.
Yeah. What are your thoughts,
Actually,
Doc?
I met a company, an owner of a company that does dubbing, no?
Mm.
And he was the first to say, I was surprised when he said he's looking forward to AI because voice actors in his mind, some of them are some of the hardest people to deal with. Especially daw yung mga Inglesero. That's what he said. So he's more than looking forward to the time when AI will just wipe them out. So that's another perspective, no? When you say voice industry, it's not just the voice talent, it's also
Mm-mm.
the companies who hire them. And yeah, I mean, all indications point to AI taking over many of the voice talent. And it's a one shot deal. Like I alam ko sa 11 Labs, you only need 1 minute, a 1 minute clip of you
Oh,
speaking
wow.
naturally.
Yeah.
And it will be able to recreate na. What if you do like 5 minutes or 30 minutes? You just pay the voice actor once, and that's it. No need to rehire them. Kaya I think that's why I'm so bearish about this particular sector, and it doesn't take a lot to synthesize more voices eventually. Nah, that's like generic enough. You can't pin it down to anyone anymore. I mean, I'm sure that technology will probably exist if it doesn't exist already. So it doesn't look very bright for voice talents and eventually actors also with the deep fakes. No, I'm worried about that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of looking at the other industries then that aren't necessarily using voice actors but use voices a lot. So for example, like customer service, diba? Like we could have a lot of efficiency there, for example, as compared to baka now, mina-manual lookup lang, especially if bago ka pa lang sa customer service, diba? Like, there are also metrics there. But if you are potentially able to integrate AI effectively, right, that could add a lot. Also, in terms of the other interesting avenue I was thinking about is what about assistive tech for people with disabilities? So like using voices there. And I guess I was thinking about that because when I was scrolling on TikTok this week, um, so TikTok is not my source of news, but I was just scrolling away, and there was this influencer who was talking about how she had a terminal illness, and one of the things that happens to her is she loses the ability to speak in full sentences. So the way they're using AI is they integrate AI to help them speak. But she was at this conference, and one of the people who was speaking, I think, was like a female, like white person. But then yung AI voice na lumabas was of a male black person. Diba? So how can we work on that? How can we do better? And how can we actually make sure that when we apply these voice AI, they're effective? Diba? So I thought that was just interesting. Any other thoughts on this article, Carlo, before we move on to the next one?
If you click on that minimum rates established by SAG-AFTRA, I think this is where it kind of falls apart. They still don't have like uh rates
Mm,
that's made for AI licensing, right? Like I think it should be a lot cheaper. Like right now, if you just Google SAG-AFTRA voice rates or something, there's an actual like spreadsheet that they have. Um, and it's still pretty expensive. But I do think like they're gonna have to change that if they actually want people to uh AI companies to start licensing them out. But yeah, we'll see what happens there.
yeah, I agree. I really love the insights that you both mentioned because it's kind of cool to see this industry evolving, whether AI will quote unquote make or break or something in between. It's most likely probably something in between about how that all balances out. And in terms of like the risks and ethics related to just AI and voice, I think every week we kind of talk about new AI cost scams in the news or AI scams published in the news. So this week, I think Doc might have been the one who shared this. So scammers turn to phishing, video phishing, voice phishing, sorry, using AI generated voice. So from PLDT Smart. So it's actually in the Philippines, right? And I don't want to spend too long on this article, but I guess my biggest question here, right, in terms of summary, this article is just saying that now there are more types of phishing scams happening because text messages weren't working anymore, and there have been numerous ways that telco companies have combated text phishing. Now they're moving on to voice phishing, and as we've seen, it's a little bit harder to detect. I think like you can tell sometimes, but sometimes it's still harder to detect depending on the AI that you use. So for this article, when we were discussing it on chat, what was your initial reaction? Are you surprised, or did you think it was just a matter of time before this happened in the Philippines?
I think it's a matter of time, and I think it's going to get better in the next 2 months. So, sorry, it's going to get worse in the next 2 months. Because I think the technology is just getting better, right? Like the real-time responsiveness of this is getting better. And if you've ever looked into social engineering, which
Yeah.
is a way for hackers to access information without having to code anything, but that's gotten a whole lot better, right? And you could do that more with voice than you could over SMS, right? Because SMS, sorry, over SMS, their typing might be bad, the grammar might be bad. With voice AI, like it might be able to correct all of that, and it's going to be more convincing. And there's like cool tools out there like Hume, Hume.ai, that can detect emotions. Sorry, there should be an air quote. Detecting emotions in real time, right? You could try the demo actually if you want, and
Ooh,
you could talk to it, and it will tell you if you haven't tried this yet, even better. So you get your real-time reaction to this. So start a
I actually
conversation.
have. Okay, cool. I love
So tell it about your weekend.
loading. All right.
You know, I am here for you. Caught up.
User
Who is that?
Oh, thanks.
interactive. Wait, mute.
I am
Oh.
here for you. Oh,
Oh, is it because we're not
sure.
on mute
Let's
or like
pause and reflect for a moment. What's on your mind? I'm listening without any judgment, just an open ear.
oh, okay, wow, that's pretty cool. So if I answer back,
Is
like
that
don't answer back.
AI talking?
Yeah, yeah,
It's Hume AI.
yeah. Unmute it and then tell it about your weekend. And look at the stuff, the stats on the right side. As a data scientist, you'll enjoy this.
I see what you
My
mean now.
weekend.
My weekend was great. I had a great weekend.
Got it. You're referring to the interface showing emotional expression data on the. That's wonderful to hear.
I think it's like
Glad
sensory
you had such a
overloading.
great weekend. What were
Oh,
some of the
there.
highlights or things you most enjoyed?
I had a great time because it was a long weekend. Interest, joy, excitement.
Ah, yes, those long weekends are the best. Having that extra day off always feels like such a treat.
Oh, this is so cool.
So
Okay.
it sounds like you really saved the extra free time and are like, this is a lovely little break from the normal routine.
That's so cool. Okay, that's pretty cool. That gives like scores and stuff like that. What do you know what model this is built on or who actually maybe I can look it up. Like how did they come up with this and who came up with this?
Well, it's a proprietary closed source model, but there's a lot of open source stuff out there. But I do think like this is, if you don't know this is coming, like you don't understand how AI is starting to quantify your emotions to any of your voice responses, right? And like if a computer can do that, it can start try to convince you of other things, right?
Yeah.
So I think vishing is, well, one, they need a better term for it, but two, it's coming. I mean, I'm surprised it took this long, right? Um, maybe it took this long for journalists to figure it out, but like, it's been happening for at least a few years, right, Doc? We've seen we've seen cases of this for some time. But
You
it's
know where this would be devastating? It would be devastating in poker.
Ah.
So if you had this, you had this machine reading all your opponents,
And then you have a
oh
calmness
my
score
god,
and it's like
that
negative
would
calmness.
that would be it. Get
Yeah.
the poker face from AI. Yeah, you'll be able to call them on their any bluff at
Diba?
massive
Or
advantage.
whatever the opposite of calmness is, tas ang taas ng score. Yeah, I really, honestly, this is so cool. It reminds me a lot of like when I was um doing an NLP class before. Like you could tell emotion from text, but that's been there for a long time. To kind of see this like in voice, because I haven't done a ton of voice before. I'm just like, wow. Like it even tells you the surprise is negative. That's interesting. Negative surprise. Like that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and they raised like $100 million or something crazy. But the more interesting thing is that OpenAI's new model has this, and it's supposed to be better
Mm,
by benchmarks, right? And it's just an API. You don't have to host anything. You don't have to build in
yeah.
anything. It already has multimodal. So if like the the vishing AI is trying to get like a bank account, right? They can ask for a screenshot instead of just asking for the phone number. So like I don't know. It's a it's getting there and it's getting worse. But you know, on the other side of this, like relatively easy to just have your own AI kind of respond to all these random calls, right? So if there's like someone should make an app for grandmothers where like or mothers, where they if it's a bank related question, it goes directly to your personal AI and it never reveals any of your bank information if it doesn't need to, right? I think it's
Yeah.
gonna be
Yeah.
there's gonna, the defense for this is gonna be interesting, but yeah, really, brave new world we're stepping into.
Yeah, and just kind of like last point on Hume AI, like even the types of emotions that they have here, I feel like are pretty robust. Like is realization even an emotion, right? Like it actually gives like a lot of different types of emotions. I'm surprised what the emotions are. And also just like the rankings, like that's wild, like I love this. Like I think it's really cool. But yeah, to your point, right? I think it's interesting to see kind of how AI could combat AI for good, right? Like combat the negative applications of bad actors. So I'm excited to see how that works out as well. And on that note, we are talking a lot about voice AI, but looking at deep fake videos and images, one of the articles that we saw this week also was San Francisco suing deepfake porn sites. If I can find that link. Wait, it's in our chat. One moment.
So while you're looking for it, so the city of San Francisco, the government of the city of San Francisco, is starting to sue companies for allowing deep fakes to be made for porn sites. Um, why this is important is because there's not really a lot of cities in the world who can do this, right? Because San Francisco is in a really good place for this because so many of these like tech companies are um, have offices like head offices in San Francisco, so they're in a unique place to do this. But yeah, kind of interesting to see what happens from there. Doc Ligot just entered the waiting room. Um,
Welcome back. Yeah, and I think while I'm looking for the article, like one interesting point I thought about while I was reading this is, you know, it's interesting because this actually could mean a lot for the larger regulatory environment surrounding AI. Like the fact that something is happening in San Francisco, and how like the suing is working, and also just like what legal controls they are trying to put in place, and to your point earlier, whether or not they would be effective or implementable. So Doc, I guess any thoughts on this while I'm searching for the article.
this is
Yeah,
the where San Francisco is
yeah,
suing.
yeah. It's the same as the issue on voices. I mean, I don't know how you're gonna enforce it without opening it. Well, it's in the US. They're very particular about personal and
Yeah.
liberties dun it. I don't know. I'm bearish about this as well. Like, because the
Yeah,
moment you allow it, then it can curtail free speech and blah blah blah. Wala na. That's it.
yeah.
Um,
I think the secondary effects of this maybe is people are gonna these companies are gonna have tighter rules around using their tech for pornography or whatever.
yeah.
But
Mhm.
the tertiary effect of this is that um, a lot of these companies will just move out of San Francisco, right?
Yep.
Just move, just move to some other city or country where they won't be as penalized, right? And I think um,
They'll just move to Texas. Because
just
everything is bigger in Texas.
move to the
Yeah,
Philippines.
I think implementation is really hard. But one aspect I was thinking about, just like in terms of like the social implications, like the fact that these bad actors know that they are, I don't know, quote unquote, being watched, or that they are that the government is putting together laws or just rules and controls around AI misuse. For some that might actually, well, maybe not all, but for some that might be enough to kind of dissuade them from continuing whatever it is they're doing, maybe creating porn and whatnot. But just to like show that the industry does care and the government does care. So I think that's like a move forward in terms of just AI regulations. But I really do agree that implementing this would be difficult, right? Because it's hard to, like, even now, right? Like with like pornography, it's really hard to catch the people doing that. Like there are well-known pornography websites, but they're still ongoing, even though some types of um a lot of the content on there may or may not be legal, right? And those are like well known. So
I think Americans are very protective of their porn.
yeah, spicy take. But yeah, no, for sure, right? Because I think we were talking like 2 weeks ago that a lot of the initial applications of image AI are really like for pornographic applications, right? And even looking at like the data sets that we have of images, even looking at like IDs and whatnot, just like images in general, a lot of the information we have on that are literally like from porn sites.
Yeah, deepfakes got started in porn, no? Or at
Yeah.
least it contributed to its development. So, and I think ano rin, cloud computing was because of porn, storing all that material pretty much created the internet.
Yeah, and I think one of the somewhat unique aspects about deepfakes being used in porn is that there are a lot of social um implications, right?
Problems, no? Yeah.
Yeah, the fact that we're dealing a lot of the time like with minors, dealing with parts of society that are high risk but who are also supposed to be protected the most.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's interesting to see where this goes, but also just glad to know that governments are concerned, right? Like the fact that there is concern, because a lot of the time, you don't even know if like people care. Like the fact that people care, I think, tells us a bit more about our humanity, that it's still there, our values, that they're still there, right? Like we're not completely degenerating.
Yeah, if I were gonna take the cynical view on this, this is part of the problem of why governments shouldn't be regulating this, because like they're not regulating the root causes of any of this, right? They're regulating like symptoms of the problem, right?
Yep.
Like if a company can just move, that's not really like fixing the problem, you know what I mean? But I do think like David Chu, who I think is this what is he, a board member for um for California or for San Francisco.
Mhm.
Uh, Actually, a good friend of your semi cousin, see Dexter. I think
Okay.
they used to be
Nice.
roommates or something at some point. But you know, like I don't know him well enough to say that he's doing this for political points in a political year, in an election year. But there's like it's not actually addressing the root cause of the problem.
Mm.
It's just another move by a city to like maybe drive some business away. But yeah, interesting to keep an eye on to see how the secondary, tertiary, and whatever the fourth level effects are.
Yeah, and kind of like to your point about moving businesses out of that state, diba? Parang hashtag not our problem. Because like, like you said, a lot of, these porn issues have existed way before deepfakes were a thing. And this industry has been there for a while. So now we're kind of just seeing more of what that is, right? It's kind of like exacerbating these issues. Um,
I mean,
and I guess, yeah, go
I
ahead.
mean, I just looked this up. I don't know this off the top of my head, right? But at some point, like in the right before 2010, porn traffic was like 30% of the internet, right? And like, it's yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think for the longest time, the internet porn industry drove technology, right? Like all the things that the internet porn companies adopted, technologically speaking, were adopted by the greater internet and tech companies. Like except until I think the first one to break that was when Steve Jobs decided not to use Flash, right? But every other thing has like been driven by the internet porn industry, as far as like what what tech's being used. But yeah, I think interesting to see where this goes. But also like this is a much longer conversation.
Yeah, I think like as a kind of last note on this news article, what we're seeing with just like ethics in AI, it's like on a larger scale, I think it's forcing us to take a step back and like reevaluate our values as a community. Because a lot of these issues have been existing long before. A lot of these issues we've gone back to over and over again, whether it's like phishing or scams or, deep fakes or using copyrighted things by artists, right? Like they are issues that have existed long before AI. It's just now we're kind of seeing it moving at an exponential pace. And because of globalization as well, we're kind of seeing how these affect different parts of the world, like how governments in different parts of the world are reacting, how companies are reacting. So yeah, it's really interesting to kind of have that look back, right? Or look back and look forward as well. So our last news article for this week before we dive into our two core topics of AI in education and AI in images is this really cute, interesting chubby cat on TikTok. When you guys sent this over, I was like, I kind of jumped into the wormhole and I was just like watching like I don't know, maybe like an hour of videos of this like chubby cat. Right. So this is interesting because apparently, so this cat is, AI generated, and this user MP Minds has apparently made a lot of money by creating this AI generated cat on TikTok. And if you go in and like watch the videos that they have this cat in really weird scenarios.
Is
Um,
it AI generated video?
yeah, yeah. Do you
Galing.
wanna
Okay.
see one? Do you wanna see one? Should we show one now?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
go.
Hypothetical.
Okay, let's click into actually the content here. It's really really weird actually. It's really weird. Usually paawa yung cat or may some sort of storyline that is like I don't know why I kept watching it, but I kept watching it. So example. Yeah, so that kind of goes on and like his entire page, like if you look at his entire page, and he has 1.2 million followers and 25 million likes. And they are like all like that with the same audio. So it's just like the crying cat, So yeah, initial reactions before we kind of dive into this and what this means for AI and society.
Does it say how he's making money off of it? Or she, or he?
It doesn't, but what I can guess is on TikTok, like if you do post videos over 1 minute, there is like a creator fund and you can make money off of that based on like the number of views and the number of likes. Their algorithm is a bit different, but they have different like tiers as well. Um, you could go live, but I doubt he's going live with these like cats. Like, look at that, doesn't he look so sad? So, so yeah, I think he's making money just off like the number of likes and views and probably like shares and all of. I think most of his videos are above 1 minute, which is what you need to monetize on TikTok.
So apparently TikTok pays contributors between 50 cents and $1 per 1,000 views through the TikTok Creator Rewards program. That
Yeah,
means it's probably like $500 to $1,000 per million views. And if he's gotten 25 million views, it's a lot of money.
yeah,
5,000, right? Um, for AI generated stuff. Um, Interesting. I mean, first thought is that like, I love the internet. So many stupid things on there. So many ways to make money that no one's ever thought of. Right? I think like, remember Grumpy Cat like maybe 10 years ago that was super famous. They made a book out of it. They had like there was
sorry. Sorry. Stop.
You just close it.
My bad. Sorry. Make it stop. Just kidding. Yeah, sorry.
Exactly,
Please go on.
exactly why they have so many views, but can't unwatch. But yeah, I think like, Grumpy Cat was an internet sensation. Boo, the cutest dog in the world, was also an internet sensation. Like, kind of makes sense that, virtual animal, AI generated animal be would also get famous. And probably like this is a beginning of many. Because I'm sure this is not a pun. This is not intended to be a pun. But there's going to be a lot of copycats, right? For this kind of thing. But yeah, it's interesting to see how people are finding new ways to make money on the internet.
Yeah, what about you, Doc? Any thoughts on this interesting AI application?
I think we'll see more of this because content creation really is the promise, diba? The
Yeah.
promise of AI. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more of this. Honestly.
Yeah, it's also interesting because I think like just like the evolution of AI along with like meme culture and the internet is something that's really only happened, I think, in the past, few years or in these like generations, right? The fact that it's like affected by memes. Like even that video of like Kamala Harris, right? It kind of started as a meme done with like the is it pineapple or like that. Oh, coconut tree. Sorry, the coconut tree video of Kamala Harris that's also became an AI generated thing. Like it was trending on TikTok for being a meme.
Mm.
So my question on this topic in general is how do you think that AI trends like this, this cute cat will affect A, the perception of AI, B, the use cases of AI, interestingly, and C, the risks associated with AI, especially because we're seeing kind of, AI memes and social media all merging into each other.
I mean, there's I think people want equality in concept, but once people can do everything that everyone else can do, they don't like it as much, especially if you're a professional who makes images, I guess. Like all of a sudden a lot of people can do the stuff that you could do. Like, you don't need to invest in a camera, or you don't need to invest in years of Photoshop skills, right? But I think generally speaking, this is gonna start happening because, um, I hate using the word democratize, but all these things are being democratized, right? For different people who don't necessarily have these skills, but now can express their thoughts in a way that other people can appreciate it, right? Like if I describe to you, I want to sell an image. I think I could make a character of a really chubby cat who cries and like begs for food and has, friends. Like this sounds stupid, right? And like it's gonna sound stupider if I draw you like a stick figure and it's a bad drawing of a cat, right? But like all of a sudden, like I could just type this um and describe it and like come up with the characters that I want. Like that's actually like what equality kind of looks like, right? Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think this is gonna be fun. It's gonna be a fun next, 20 years of just interesting character memes.
Yo, thanks for that, Carlo. What about you, Doc? Any thoughts on this?
No, I'm looking forward to getting it more democratized because even with all the tools now, maybe that's going to be the downstream benefit of doing demos of all of these tools.
Yeah.
More people use them. Parang ngayon, I feel that either people don't are not aware, or they're aware but they don't want to use for one reason or another. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's also interesting to see that, for example, like the people who initially are the companies who created these like image generation tools, I don't think that they could have imagined this is what they'd be used for, right? Like I don't know,
Mhm.
like crying cats, and all of that stuff. So in terms of like the use cases of AI, I think it's just broadening a lot more. And like you both said, it's interesting to see where it's going.
Yeah.
Um, and I think we'll continue to be surprised, right? In terms of the perception of AI, um like on the content creator side, I think for the people or the content creators who can like ride the wave, I think it presents like a good opportunity because if you're able to create all of this stuff like with AI at like a low cost, you could be making like a ton of money, right? But then on the other hand, if you're not even not well versed, just not willing to like invest the time to learn about these AI tools, right? Or don't have the resources, maybe that could feed into like inequality, diba? Kasi you'll have to work, you know, X number of times as hard to generate pictures or videos of an actual cat, diba? To get that many views. So, and we'll be talking about AI inequality a bit more like in the education piece right after this. But you can kind of see how there could be some effects of inequality as well.
Yep.
And just like the risk associated with AI, there's like when I was in that wormhole looking at this cat on TikTok, I spent way too much time doing that, honestly. I don't know. I don't know why. Like Carlo, this article you sent me, I was like, oh my gosh, spiraling. But yeah, like there were videos of children, like preschoolers, looking at videos of these AI generated cats and crying. So like the
Mm.
fact that AI is evoking emotion, right? Like how it's affecting us socially and emotionally in terms of like maturity. So I think those are bigger, broader questions in the realm of AI, right? So like a longer topic on that. But yeah, interesting to see all of these things.
Can you imagine if emotions could be prompted? I think that's where we're headed, diba?
Yeah.
Uh, and that means I intuitively I think it's true. There is a emotion is just a matter of data. So the more data you have, the better you're able to capture emotion,
Yeah.
whether it's data on your face, your blood pressure, all of these other symptoms, diba? Um, so by default, we're headed towards more and more data. Eventually, we'll be able to capture the entirety of at least the physical human experience. I don't know about the mental part, but then that means basically you can press a button and manipulate people, which is what's happening on social media, but in a very indirect way. But directly manipulate people. That's going to be interesting.
I mean, politicians and advertising have been trying to do this for years and centuries, you know, so
Yeah,
I think
and they're getting close, right? They're getting close with the Cambridge Analytica stuff,
yeah.
and stuff that even neuroscience hasn't explained enough of the brain, diba? For
Mm.
for us to adequately rule out all of these other things. So yeah.
And
Uh,
the fact that we can like quantify emotion. I mean, as we've just seen earlier, like on Hume, you can kind of quantify like emotion already, like in voice. We've been able to do that with text for a while. I'm sure we can do that with like facial images and videos as well, right? So, to what you mentioned, we have been heading that path for a while, and I think now we're just seeing it being applied a lot more, especially because, for example, a lot of people don't know sometimes now what they're sharing is actually AI generated.
mm,
Now it's
mm.
really impressive, diba? Like even what you shared, Doc, the other day about like blue. Parang for me, like medyo realistic na din yun, diba? So like if they're not in
Yeah, and
the
that was like a casual job over 30 minutes.
yeah,
Imagine people like devoting hours to perfecting movement, emotion. It's very possible.
yeah. Um, and kind of like shifting gears a little bit, but looking at another industry that is still very affected by AI. So looking at education now. One interesting article this week that we were discussing is AI cheating is getting worse. So colleges still don't have a plan. I know the three of us have talked about this extensively personally, and also I know, Doc, that you also mentioned this in your podcast earlier or like your interview earlier, right? But how do you think the movement in cheating and using AI for cheating, whether it's like ChatGPT or whatever, how do you think that's going to progress throughout the years? And what can schools do, right? Like, what response do you think would be the most helpful from schools? Because I think a lot of schools now, for example, like my brother's classes, they just ban him from using AI. And I think that's kind of been what many universities have resolved to do, just like don't use AI, XYZ. But is there another way forward? Any thoughts on this so far?
Yeah, I think I don't know if I'm 100%, but certainly more than 50% bearish on on education. I think education the way it works now, it's pretty much over. Because students are just gonna use AI to shortcut. Well, I mean, to be fair, I mean, or rather to be unfair, there's big chunks of what you study in school is completely useless today.
Yeah.
so so I think it's fair game. Okay, if it's useless to me, I'm just gonna use AI to kill that, no? But then does that make the students of the future less capable or lazier? Yeah, it's possible, no? So the whole thing needs a revamp. Unfortunately, the education sector is still run by people who live in the past. Diba? So, and these are highly educated people who live in the past. Diba? To be in the DepEd, you need to have a PhD in education. No?
Yeah.
So, so I don't know. And these are people who will be the last to listen to reason, who will be the last to look at evidence. They'd rather be defensive. Talagang that's why I'm so bearish about it. Or maybe I'm not bullish enough to even bother trying to solve it in my capacity. There's so many other battles I can fight that can also lead to education, but not via the university system. Talagang
Mm.
it's completely hopeless now. But that's just me. I don't know
Yeah.
what you think.
I
What
think
about you, Carlo?
I'm obviously on Doc's side on this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to, well, we are creating something that's, related to this. I'll talk about that later. But, I think more than that, like also the grade school, the primary school, the grade school, the middle, senior high school, uh, post grad, all of those have like bad ways of understanding whether or not somebody understands what they're learning,
Hmm.
right? That's a crux of the problem, right? That's a root cause of all of this is that we schools have had blunt tools for assessing someone's understanding of the materials that they're learning, of the subjects that they're learning. So, for example, you make somebody write an essay and then you subjectively as a teacher um, read through the essay and say, okay, this person talked about X, Y, and Z points, they explained it well, blah, blah, blah. Like they start going towards like the form of the answer instead of the actual answer, right? Like I feel like there's a lot of essays that I've written that are not as good as some of the sentences as some of the sentences that I've written, right? Except I'm getting tested on, how long is the essay, right? I could have
Mm.
just answered it super efficiently and succinctly in, 3 sentences, probably some of these things. And I think you look at memorization, and this is a big problem in the Philippines where a lot of these schools are assessing somebody by assessing how smart or how good somebody is by how much they memorize, right?
Yeah.
Like, and like I don't know, it's just there's just a lot of blunt tools that education all around the world, not just the Philippines, has been using to try to assess people and how good they are. And then you put on top of that like these universities and some of these private schools that take a lot of pride into how many people they turn away because they don't pass the basic test to get in. Um, and then on top of that, they make it a business, right? They make it so they charge a lot of money in it. So like very bearish on schools. I feel like the school system needs to be revamped. But if you have time and you haven't read these yet, Sal Khan from Khan Academy,
Mm.
Khan, wrote 2 books. I can't remember the name of the first one, but it's about the history of the educational system. Um,
This
so,
one.
and then the second one is Brave New Words, but basically it's about AI and how it revolutionized education. But the first book is really good too. It's about, the history of the educational system and why and how we got here, right? Um, but yeah, the second one is very relevant to what we're talking about because of the three of us, but also really good if you're not an AI person or you're just interested in this stuff and how people are developing these things, right? But I do think I think oral exams are probably the best way to do it, but it doesn't scale, right? Like, so if you're a teacher, if you have 30 students, it
Mm.
doesn't scale to like make everyone do an oral exam one by one. But with AI, you can kind of do it, and this is kind of what we're basing our certification programs on for AI Republic. Um, so we're building tech to kind of handle this, so we could start certifying how good somebody is at AI ethics or ChatGPT prompt engineering or Midjourney or all kinds of things. But I think the tools that people are using now are both to detect AI and to test people are not the right ways to do it, because I think the problem is that they haven't tried to go after the main problem, which is like, okay, how do I know that this person I'm teaching is understanding?
Really knows what
Yeah,
they're
really
doing,
know.
right?
And
Yeah.
I think there, in the boot camp world, we make people do capstone projects, right? And I think that's just a better assessment of whether or not someone can do anything, because like someone could give me 5,000 lines of code. I don't know if it works or not, right? Like, but I could assess the output of it. If it actually like connects together, if there's like bugs in the logic, like all kinds of these things. But I think education right now, as we know it, is like not really doing what it's supposed to do. At most, they're great babysitters that impart knowledge, right? Um, but that's not what we need as a society.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're all on the same side on this, right? Like you, me, and Doc. I think, you know, AI really has the potential to transform education and to take us to like a much higher place in terms of how much people can learn, how much we can quote unquote democratize education, especially like tutoring services for those who do need additional help, and just like how much more resourceful we could teach students to be, right? I think a lot of the schools I've seen so far have been either just demonizing AI or um there are some that are progressive, right? There are some that are progressive that actually tell you to go, okay, you can use AI and then either tell me how it's done what you wanted correctly. Is it doing it correctly? Can you analyze the output from the AI tool, so on and so forth? But like for example, even big schools like Ateneo, right? Like so my brother goes to Ateneo. Um and they do have like a data science program, right? I really like, I think it's a pretty good data science program, pretty impressive. Like the faculty seems to be really good, but they're completely not allowing AI, I think, from what I've seen. Right. So why is that, right? Like why is that?
It's crazy
Right?
for data science.
Yeah, and it's just interesting because
So Amber, you're a data scientist, right?
yeah,
Or you were trained in data
yeah.
science. Do you
You wrote a
think
book, data science.
do you think data science will survive AI? Hot take.
I mean, I think that the techniques and tools that we've learned will, but not, I don't think people will be like hard coding stuff, right? Like, I don't think anybody needs to learn how to like code a decision tree from scratch. Because like,
Hmm.
in grad school, for example, like I learned how to do it like just like with NumPy. Like even now we have packages for that. Like I think it's good to know how to do it and it's good to have that knowledge because it does actually help. Like the knowledge does help. But in industry, I doubt anybody will make us implement that from scratch. And a lot of the things that have taken quite long to do in data science, like even NLP, I remember like that time when we were doing sentiment analysis from scratch, right? Or doing summarization from scratch. Now we literally just have like ChatGPT pa nga lang, diba?
Mm, mm,
So for me personally, it's making me think about like what is my specialization, right? Like what do I want to be good at? Like what do I want to be able to bring to companies and to industries? And it's very introspective
mm.
because AI is actually allowing me to learn things much faster. And also parang not to be too bogged down na okay, I only do NLP or I only do this specific type of coding. Right? Parang you could either get stuck in that mindset na hanggang dito lang ako. And I could either compete with the AI or I could broaden my skill set by using the AI like as a tool, I think.
You
Right?
know, by the way, I kind of still believe in it the way you do. but then consider the car, no?
Yeah.
You don't have to study how the internal combustion engine works
Yeah, for sure.
to drive one.
Mm-mm.
So I feel that if we're not close, we're near the point. We haven't gone past the point. We're near it, where a user of AI will not need to know data science.
For sure, yeah.
And
For
the people who think they're studying data science, some of them shouldn't. Parang like like there's this growing number of people who I know came from business and they're taking an MSDS.
sure.
And I have to wonder why they want to do that. Do they really want to hand solve a linear regression or do some linear algebra? Do they really want to do that? Some do, some weirdos do, but that's not going to help them make better decisions, no? So, of course, respect to anyone. You study as much as you want. That's another thing pala I neglected to mention earlier. So, if you consider school, they have two jobs: produce labor and produce knowledge. Yun
Mm.
lang yun eh. On the production of labor, I think we're completely off by more than an order of magnitude, because the graduates we're producing are not even getting accepted in jobs. That's why certifications are still relevant, boot camps. So imagine you took this 4-year whatever course, let's say, what's a popular one? Electrical engineering, no? Um, and you still need to get retooled to become a data scientist. As an electrical engineer, that's supremely inefficient. And it's partly because they don't want to become electrical engineers in the industry anymore because they're not going to earn anything. So the labor production is completely messed up. Talking Philippines. On the knowledge production part, uh, we don't have enough PhDs. And that's actually still a fallacy, because most of the latest developments, if you look at the US, are happening not in Stanford or Berkeley. They're happening in OpenAI and Meta, in companies. But they hire PhDs, no? So there, medyo the ecosystem still works. Here in the Philippines, number one, most people can't afford to study more than a bachelor's degree. And with the quality of the bachelor's degrees nowadays, most of them don't even get into, uh, you know, masters. And people who took masters are too tired of it. They don't want to go to PhD na. So, and then you have
Oh,
startups who don't
yeah.
even care about hiring PhD. So I think the system is completely broken na here in the Philippines in terms of academia and innovation. DOST tries to maintain it because they limit their grants to PhDs, no? But that kind of they miss the boat on all of these other startups who are doing it anyway. Some of them aren't even college graduates, now they're already doing it. So I feel that's a problem. I don't even know if it's solvable. No? That's why I'm so bearish. I'll take the bad cop position when it comes to school.
Yeah,
I do
and
think.
yeah, go ahead, Carlo.
Go ahead, Amber.
No, I was just gonna add to what you mentioned. To add to that, siguro for me, the biggest takeaway I had from school, and I love school, don't get me wrong, like I really enjoyed it. Pero it's not necessarily like the technical skills. Like, yes, they're helpful. But then I think it's like more of learning how to learn yung mga intangibles as compared to, okay, like I learned how to, do a linear regression by hand, or I learned like the linear algebra view versus the stats view. Like, yes, obviously that's helpful, right? I really enjoy that also. Syempre, nahirapan din ako and I cried over my problem sets and whatnot, diba? So I really, looking back, I did enjoy that experience, even though in the moment I did not. But yeah, yun, it's really like learning how to learn as compared to like the technical chops. Because a lot of the technical stuff I've learned, I don't think I'll be using it unless I'm like the one building these tools. And a part of me does want to do that. A part of me does want to do research. So I think that's somewhat relevant. But in terms of, yun nga, even like looking at NLP, diba? Nobody really does that by hand anymore. Or nobody does that manually. Like in like the old way, diba? Like wala na tayong masyadong like rule-based, for example, diba? Like we've, moved on for that. It's just not necessarily feasible or efficient. And there's just so many
You'd be
faster,
I think
cheaper
you'd be
ways.
surprised by how much that's being taught in colleges, especially in the Philippines, right?
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
don't.
it still
Nobody
is.
does it, but like
Yeah.
people still. universities are still teaching C plus, right? Like like you should know it, but you don't need to know it to get a job after if you're 4-year grad. But yeah, uh I think PhDs are or any degree is just basically like a marker placeholder for how much time you spent trying to
Mm,
learn something, right? Um, it's a because you do need the time and space to be able to learn these things, but
mm,
you don't necessarily need a degree to show for it, right? Um, but yeah, I think to your point, Doc, like the PhD thing, like one of the articles I sent was Sakana AI, Sakana AI, and they came out with a novel way of creating white papers that it's supposed to be at like a PhD level, right? So they're marketing it as an AI scientist, which is, bad marketing, but I guess they're PhDs who aren't great at that. Image made by ChatGPT. But basically, it's an open-ended scientific discovery. So if you scroll down, they show you a bit about the architecture. That's this part. Okay, so uh, if you've ever used AI to try to make a new idea, it's pretty bad at
I
it.
I saw this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it work? It looks promising.
Um, it works. There's a lot of things you have to implement. The hard part is like you
So,
need better data. But
mm,
so I'll just go through this diagram, right? So LLMs are notoriously bad at generating new ideas, right? But basically, what this does is that they have an LLM create all kinds of ideas and plan the innovation.
mm,
They do a novelty check that just means like they check a database to make sure that this idea is new and it's not something that's been published before. And then because not all ideas are uh, equal, they do an idea scoring to like try to figure out what to prioritize, right? And then
mhm,
they have an experiment template. They do a coding delta. Anyway, they create code. They experiment all kinds of things. They get data from it, and then from the data they update the plans. They do charts. The hard part about this particular implementation of Sakana AI is that it actually doesn't plot charts well, which is kind of a stupid problem. But anyway, it's very early days, right? But this is kind of cool that they're kind of thinking about it the right way, I think, because this is kind of the scientific process, right? You have an idea, you make sure it's new, you test it out, and then you update your plan, and then you start publishing things. And this is like automating all of that. Plus, like it automates the peer review process. Um, but yeah, I don't know if you need a PhD for a lot of things. I mean, definitely to be a doctor, maybe. But like, it's yeah, kind of it's brilliant, right? Like how they've done this, and this is a Japanese company doing this. But I think once AI can start experimenting on its own and making decisions based on data it gathers from the experiments, that's kind of the beginnings of artificial general intelligence, right? But yeah,
yeah,
I
it
think
was Jan LeCun who said, or I mean, most of them have said the same thing. LLMs can't plan properly, but now with this, maybe it can plan.
yeah.
he was
'Cause
actually my prof before in grad school, so that was exciting.
Wow, nice.
But yeah, dear, pero we were a big class, so obviously wala naman kaming one-on-one time, right? But he's the one who started the Center of Data Science, diba? So
Mm.
that's why he's there. And I think, yeah, like what you both have mentioned, there are a lot of things that AI can do now that it wasn't, before it would need to be like an actual person doing everything from scratch. So I think going back to like the schools, right? Like, what skills do we want to teach? Like, what competencies do we want to build, right? Like, do we want people to be more creative? We're seeing that, right? Maybe AI isn't as good as, creating ideas or, that creativity aspect, right? So where does like the human come in, and how do we differentiate what it is we bring to the table versus what AI can help us with and do more efficiently?
You know,
Diba? Kasi,
I've thought about that
yeah.
question for the Philippines.
Mm-mm.
Kasi either we don't have good ideas or we don't execute,
Mm-mm.
and I think it's a little of both. But then I think it's more of we also don't have good ideas. It's more of that. because we seem to be adept at executing on bad ones also. So, for example, that MRT ramp, you remember that, which was
The
more of a
slide.
slide. Yeah,
What was
I
that? I don't know that one. What is it?
no, the one with the super steep incline.
Oh,
Eh,
the one from the news a couple of weeks.
I literally just pasted that photo on ChatGPT and asked, "What do you think's wrong with this photo?" And ChatGPT said, "It looks like the incline's too steep." I mean, if AI knows how to do that, um, it just means that either people are not being diligent, they're just complying with orders, spending money needlessly, and that's part of my hope that if enough of Filipinos across all sectors, let's say that theoretical 1%, so 1 million Filipinos, are using these tools, sana, diba? It might result in better governance of stuff. Not counting the corruption factor also. And then going back to an earlier theme. So education is weird because it's run by highly intelligent people, but in aggregate, the whole system's dumb. So that feels like a structural problem. In other words, you're hiring a lot of really educated people, but somehow that education is not being put to good use or it's not being used properly. Um,
Or
and
our definition of intelligence is wrong.
more, yeah, we can't
Or-
discount the possibility that a lot of these educated people are also dumb. Uh, and I'll share an experience with you. So I was asked to speak in NCPAG, no, National College of Public Administration and Governance in UP. And whenever I'm invited to UP or any of these education events, my name is always as is an occupational hazard because they don't know if I'm a doctor or. So and I remember I think I forgot to clarify that. So half of the people there were like, there's always this perceivable parang split second pause when they say Doc Ligot. Yung parang ganon. And in my head, wow, look at all this brain power just trying to resolve my name and whether it was a title or not. That's such a wasted resource, no? Why can't we just speak about my speech? I was talking about the future of work. So that adds to my bearishness. The whole education sector is too stuck up. Sorry to be frank, no, stuck up on their own titles. And then you mentioned kanina, Carlo, yung peer review. Peer review is broken, man. It is broken. It's political. Um, and the premise dati kasi was you have to ensure the people submitting research have a minimum level of understanding, di ba? So that they can propose new stuff. Ngayon, with the speed of AI, it's become the opposite. You're relying on people whose knowledge is by definition outdated to judge new ideas. That's what it is, right? Your professors who must have done their thesis 100 years ago is gonna judge your new AI idea. It's not gonna work. It is not gonna work, and that's why a lot of people skip that part. Na most of the cutting edge research is not even on Nature or Science or. Diba? It's on archive, which is
yeah.
preprints, diba? Which carries with its own risks because it's less rigorous. Although I think Cornell really vets somewhat. It's almost like a peer review without being a peer review. Pero
Mm.
that's the best you've got. If you go by yung formal journals, by the time it gets published on Nature, it's outdated na. It's useless. And there's a lot of fake papers pa that get to Nature, no, and Science. So, like, how am I supposed to, parang ano nga, I think it was neuroscience or some other field, na the prevalence of fake research is 30%. Like 3 out of every 10. Sabi ko nga sa mga tao, would you ride a plane that has a 3 out of 10 chance of crashing? No, of course not. I'm never going to ride the plane like that. So do we still want to trust traditional research, diba? So, and then that's global. If you go back to the Philippines where everything's a basket case. Yeah, that's the supreme irony. I'm not disrespecting anyone who works in Philippine research, DOST, UP, Ateneo, etc. Individually perhaps brilliant people, but what are we really proud of? We're proud of a mediocre process that produces research in the middle of nowhere in the Pacific Ocean, diba? I think we really need to wake up and assert if the Philippines really has a shot and what it takes to have a shot. Kaya, and the one of the few sectors where it has a shot, which is, let's say, BPOs, goes by, wala, they don't care about BPOs pretty much. They think it's a cash cow, diba? So I feel our priorities are all in the wrong places. And usually, that's like Carlo is the best example. Even you, Amber, it's these people who, and maybe to a certain extent me, it's people who've actually studied abroad, worked abroad, who will kind of have a more, parang balanced view of things. But the people who have spent all their lives studying and working here in Philippines, wala. Sorry about that rant.
And I think that's yet to add to what you mentioned. It's really hard kasi, kunyari when I was in high school here, diba? Like Carlo was mentioning about. So I went to a traditional school, like traditional Catholic all-girls school. And loved my experience there. But in terms of the way I was taught, like I think nahirapan din ako sa critical thinking because a lot of it was memorization. And you're taught that from a young age. Right. So these are like the frameworks that we're dealing with. A lot of our exams were okay, take out one po sheet of paper, tapos nun, regurgitate what I just mentioned sa slides. Tapos nun when we're in class, like even the way you take notes, which is supposed to be how you think, diba? Like how you pick up what's important. We're literally just copying the slides. And like we were graded on our notes. Not about whether or not we understood it, but how complete it was in relation to the slides. Right? So like, parang pinokopya mo lang yung slides sa akin sa notebook ko in like a nice way. Diba? Kung maganda pa sulat ko or whatever, diba? And
Speaking as someone, just to add to this, I can't let go of this. So I can relate somewhat because I also took a high school in a conservative Catholic school. Um, and I realized what I was missing when I went to UP, no, somehow for college. They teach a lot of dogma in these schools, no? And dogma means it's anti-critical thinking. You're not supposed to question it, just assume it's true. Because on top of that edifice is all the values of you being a, I don't know, student or a school. That can be damaging pala, no? I felt damaged because when I left, it took a while for me to kind of, get some independent thought. And I felt I missed out a lot because, here I was. Of course, UP isn't, it is what it is. But and I'm mingling with activists who somehow have an idea of things that I didn't really care about. It took a while for me to adjust. Kaya I feel na I had a withdrawal symptom during college. And then finally when I started working, it if you're one of the lucky ones and the dogma helps you, maybe your school gives you the right connections. It double reinforces pa na, see, because I have all of these values, blah blah blah, and now I'm doing well. But I wasn't one of those. So I was kind of the unlucky ones. Fortunately, I wasn't one of those because I got to be a bit more critical of it. And you see it everywhere, like there are companies in the Philippines who only hire from certain schools. That's the
oh yeah.
dogma working in your favor, no? I hated it. I hated it. That's why when I finally started talking with Carlo, kailan na ba yung Carlo? Kapag mga less than 10 years ago, diba? Or something like that.
2018.
Before the pandemic, at least.
Yeah.
I go, oh my God, what's wrong with this country?
He was talking to me. No, but I think, this is a problem with countries like the Philippines that puts emphasis on process instead of data, right? Like a peer review is basically like a form of market data, right? Like it should be a form of market data. Like does the market say this is right or not? Meaning like do other people say is right or not, and do you have data on it? And I think, to argue with your point a little bit earlier, Doc, you said the point of schools is to produce labor. One of the main goals is to produce labor, and then knowledge, right? PhDs. I think yes, but I think the schools are taking it too literally. Like labor that should be leaders, is what they should be producing, right? But they're producing like good workers who understand the dogma and can regurgitate the dogma and can like fall in line with the process. And really that's not what we need, especially in a time of AI, right? Like AI is probably better at that than most people, right? At our very early stage of AI right now, so much AI is better at that stuff than people. But I think we're gonna have to get there. We're gonna have to change schools, right? Like one of the main problems with schools, from my point of view, is that it's kind of linear and it
Mm-hmm.
ends when you're like 20 something, right? Which is kind of crazy because right now, like none of these schools in the Philippines are teaching any AI things, right? Um, are you supposed to not learn about this later? Are you supposed to stop learning or go back and get a master's or a PhD or go back and get a second bachelor's degree? Like that, the process is broken, right? And I think, um, to your question earlier, like schools should be producing people who can make good decisions, gather resources to get enough information to make the right decision, and then know how to what to do with all that information, right? Um, and maybe at best, like these schools should be producing like humanities graduates so they can understand humans, and then eventually specializing in something else. I don't know, but yeah, either way, like I don't think like if I ever have kids, not gonna send them to college for sure.
Yeah, I was just gonna say also, with what you both mentioned, I think the way we view education is really changing a lot, right? And I don't know, like maybe globally it was different not before, but when I was younger, right, it was also very, very linear. Parang, okay, do well, get good grades. Pero there wasn't a big emphasis on creation. There wasn't as much of a big emphasis on like leadership. And then if you kind of go against the grain, I don't know if that's the correct idiom, right? But if you don't follow like the leaders, or if you have an idea that's, varying in opinion, parang ikaw pa yung matatakot to say that idea, right? Because it's more of like obedience, right? Which, okay, some obedience is good, but I think we also need to parang balance it out and know when we should parang use our own agency, and know when we should have the responsibility to make our own decisions, right? We shouldn't throw that decision making responsibility to whoever's in charge lang, right? And I think that's part of being a leader and also being a good follower. It doesn't mean na, okay, because siya yung like head or siya yung susundan, di na ako magde-decide autopilot na lang, right? I don't think that should be how we're teaching people. And honestly, like a lot of us, I don't think any of us studied like hardcore computer science for college. I mean, I did archaeology. So, you know what I mean? Like to Carlos' point about like humanities, right? And I know, Doc, you did accounting also, right? So I think having that quote unquote diverse background is actually one of the biggest things that help. Because in archaeology, what we did is we debated, we talked about topics. And syempre, mas mahirap mangopya as compared sa engineering kasi you can copy an essay din naman, but minsan sobrang particular. Especially if you're supposed to come up with an idea of what a specific artifact like lapis lazuli meant in, a certain region or community, diba? So medyo masyadong isolated, diba? So it's really like thinking about how these things come together, or even like working on our capstone or thesis. It helped me, I think, because yung idea generation, coming up with that idea, coming up with connections, and then just practicing that critical thinking at that level, that was so helpful. That's really what I got from my
Yeah,
education.
I think that's one thing the three of us have in common.
Yeah.
Hindi ka naman com-sci, Carlo, di ba? Like, aren't you
Um,
interdisciplinary or something? In
philosophy,
ano?
political
Oh,
science, super
tama.
useless.
So, and that's actually a point worth making because even accounting, although it's sort of a technical subject, there was a lot of business
Yeah.
associated with it, you know. And I think that's missing also from the AI discourse. Okay, let me think twice. Yeah, even abroad, there's a massive bias towards computer science
Yeah.
and math, no? In the Philippines, it's weird. There's sort of a bias, but no bias because a lot of the people I know in the industry, they come from stat, maybe physics, a couple of electrical engineers. But I'm gonna be very, very harsh. They're not as monolithic as like the Stanford comp sci people, or the MIT ones. Parang I think I think it's almost a bad copy that okay because the best people in this industry are from MIT, Stanford, computer science. Therefore, because I'm computer science in Ateneo or wherever, I'm supposed to be the leader there. I don't see it happening here. In fact, I struggle to think of any luminary. I could be really wrong. in local AI, that's computer science. I don't know if you know anyone, Carlo. Si ano, 'di ba? Si Pros Naval, he's physics,
Plus,
isn't he?
he
Isn't he
was,
physics? Or I don't know, maybe he's comp sci.
but I mean, maybe Ruel Atienza has been doing. Oh,
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, but
um,
he sticks
anyway,
pretty close to school, no? It doesn't really get around, right?
but I don't know. I think like even all of the titles of
Of
AI,
UP.
all of the titles of AI, right? Like even Jeffrey Hinton wanted to study brains. That's why he got into AI, right? Like
Is Hinton comp sci? He
uh,
is, 'di ba? Or no?
yeah, at some point I think he got something in comp sci, but I
Yeah,
think
parang for me, again, I could be misarticulating it. Parang comp sci abroad in the US, maybe UK, talagang yun, no? That's the gold standard. But when you come here, where are our comp sci people? They're developing websites or something. I don't know.
Well,
Um,
yeah, 'cause, when I was in high school, actually, like, super funny story. When I was starting college, I told myself there are only two things I wouldn't do. Number one, be a doctor because I faint at the sight of blood. Maybe not faint, pero it's hard. So
it's not a bad thing, yeah.
never do doc. And then the second one was IT or comp sci. Sabi ko, I'll never do comp sci. Like, you will never catch me writing code. And the reason why is because when I was in high school, we had an IT class mandatory.
That you
But
hated.
they made me do, yeah, like, they made us write, like, a BMI calculator with, like, Visual Basic pa yata yun. And I, like,
Did you
absolutely
save that code? That would be nice to see.
no, I didn't. I tried to forget about and like my prof was really nice and everything, but I just like I didn't understand why we were doing it. Like the UI was so ugly. It wasn't engaging. And I was like I had this perception when I was younger na okay, pag nag-IT ako, baka utusan lang ako ng mga tao and I'll just be like a code monkey,
Mm.
right? But when I actually went to a hackathon in the States, I realized that like the ideas could come from me. And that's not something I got when I was taught that IT class here. Parang I thought that the ideas had to be force fed and I'm just like on the execution part. And I think that's also like a big parang mindset shift or like a limiting belief. A lot of like the people I mentor or coach sometimes, especially if they're coming from a non-traditional background, like me, super non-traditional background, like archaeology, I write papers, not code, you know what I mean? There's always this parang sentiment of I'm not good enough because I didn't study comp sci or I'm not engineering or whatever. And yes, their feelings are valid. It was really hard for me to learn the technical stuff, but it's not impossible. And especially now with AI, like you both mentioned, especially if you're working in the industry and creating applications as compared to doing like hardcore pure research, you don't really need to know all of the technical details. Like it's really the decision making aspect, knowing when to use what solution, right? Like making those kind of business decisions. Is this an appropriate tool to use, an appropriate approach or method? What are the pros and cons, downstream impact? As compared to, okay, can I, look at this like matrix and
Hey,
calculate
you
by hand?
notice, especially in the Philippines now, when they say technical, they just mean coding.
Yeah.
I'm a non-technical guy. What are you? I'm a biologist. Isn't that technical? So yeah, and I think that's why, sige, if we're gonna round it back to my first question about will data science survive AI? Data science is just all about being technical about something that you don't need to be technical about. That's why I feel that it has to transform. At some point we're gonna need to be, you know, Star Trek era where we just talk to data and you have the kind of have the framework in your head, but without the pain of writing R or Python or SQL, which is kind of the necessary evil we need to do now. Actually, we now have the opposite problem. We have a lot of people who actually know how to write Python, SQL, and R, but they don't know how to solve problems. They don't know how to structure a data flow,
Mm.
and that's harder to teach. But they kind of know their for loops, but they don't know anything else. Kasi we become very tool obsessed. And that's the first to go, actually. That's hence the criticism of why are we still teaching C++ and all that. These are all just traditional stuff, people learn. And that's why people hate PHP, for example, because it's such a hacky language, but you can easily develop a website with it, you know. And now everyone insists on doing it the harder way with React, Angular, and all that shit. So, so I feel that's the real problem with with regards to AI, because AI cuts across all of that, just cuts through it like butter, and you can literally just talk to AI and describe your problem, and maybe it'll get 80% of the solution right, and then you fill in the blanks. A lot of people hate that idea because they spend too much of their life studying how to do it manually.
Yeah,
So yeah,
same
it's really
reason why artists hate image generators, which
yes,
probably
yeah,
talk about next week, right? Because
yeah,
it's
yeah,
coming up on 2 hours
yeah.
here.
Sorry to it turned into a rant session.
No, this is great. Like I think we all have a lot of things to say about education, and I think there's a lot of ideas we have for education as well, right? Like, I don't think this is just a ranting session about what's wrong with colleges. This is also what could be fixed there, and like, how do you solve it? But I think, yeah, super interesting conversation. I love this one.
Yeah, me
Yeah,
too.
I think
I
we're gonna create another one of these soon enough.
Absolutely. I think that's also why we have AI Republic, right? Parang putting
Yeah,
ideas into practice. Um, a related point since, apparently we've spent 2 hours talking about education. Di ko napansin yung time because I'm really
you
enjoying
should
this.
moderate. You should moderate.
Yeah. Like we should use my Zoom para hindi premium so magsa-stop yung room at a certain point.
Literally cut it there, no? Tama.
Forced moderation. Yeah, and that's why like I think a lot of learning now will be on the learner itself, themselves rather. Diba? Like it will be like a self-driven learning process. Like what do you want to learn? What do you want to create? Why do you want to do it? It will be very very introspective. And that's why I think yung part of looking at fairness and disparity and whether we're providing the same access to these tools, I think that part will actually become more important and come into play, diba? Kasi what if hindi accessible yung AI tools to somebody that doesn't have the same like level of like internet bandwidth or like walang Wi-Fi, diba? So that will really
That's going to
stifle,
be a bigger problem in
yeah,
digital
diba? Like
divide.
stifle their learning
That's
potential.
massive. That's massive.
So I feel like the conversation will shift to that more than whether or
Should.
not we should allow AI like in the classroom or not, diba? So more of how can we ensure equitable access for everyone.
Yeah, I did this talk in Cebu a few months ago, and a lot of educators were there, and I always get this question when I do these things. They always say like, okay, don't you think AI is gonna just gonna make people stupider, right? And I think like one, I think people overestimate how smart people are, but secondly, like
Yep.
you look at literacy rates, if you could just Google this too, Amber. Literacy rates since like 1830. Like the world is way more literate now because of technology than we ever have been, right? Like, I don't yeah, do it from a longer point of view than 1990. But like it's a or literacy rate everywhere. Um
Literacy rate.
the world is way smarter now than it ever has been, right? Because of technology. And like, I think it's undeniable that people are smarter as a whole, which pushes everyone else who wants to be smarter than everyone else to be a little bit smarter, right? So if it's important for you to be smarter than everyone else, you're gonna have to like learn a whole lot more than you ever had before. But it's pretty crazy, right? Like I think there's like um I think you're right. The conversation should be around um who has access to these tools, not like should we police these tools, right? It
Mm.
should be like how many people are teaching these tools, or are the schools equipped enough to like know how to teach any of this stuff? Because like Amber, I don't know how old you are, but Doc and I are the same age, almost identically the same age, like a month apart, I think.
Oh wow,
And
happy birthday.
thanks.
Something happened on that
But
year that all these crazy people got born.
but like when I was going to school, the teacher I remember being angry that like I had very bad teachers who didn't know anything, because
Mm.
like my access to knowledge was limited by the teacher, right? The teacher used to be the center of knowledge for
Mm-mm.
students, in the past, right? So I went to a great school here in the Philippines for grade school, and then went to the US for public schools, which is like, not great. And I remember thinking like all these hippies are teaching me stuff and they're probably just smoking weed after school. Like like and it was limited by how much they knew, right? So and being like a shy kid who, immigrant in the US, didn't really know too many people, didn't really want to hang out with a lot of people. So I had really an early start in the internet and getting to know stuff through the internet. But think about all these people who now have access to the internet, right? All over the world, right? Like, I think you look at Africa, they skipped the whole like landline phase of industrialization and went straight to mobile.
Yep.
But I think kind of the same for, well, the same plus um accelerated for AI, right? Like people who aren't being or kids who aren't being taught how to use ChatGPT, or being discouraged even to not learn any of this stuff, because their teachers are worried that they're going to turn out to be stupid, are going to get set back, right? Like last year, I wish I told everyone to invest in NVIDIA. This year, I'm telling everyone just learn how to use ChatGPT for prompt engineering. You need that as a skill for sure, right? It's the easiest way to get a computer to do something that you wanted to do, right? And like
Yeah.
it's a and yeah, I think like all these schools and teachers are worried, like, the kids aren't learning enough, like they're missing the point. The point is that they have access to tools that will teach them these things. They're no longer the sources of information the way teachers were when Doc and I were growing up.
And I mean, I feel like when I was growing up as well. But yeah, I guess on a last note on this topic, so are any like last thoughts on this topic as well? I guess one of the things that I've been thinking about as you both were talking is really going back to like the school system, right? What is it that we want to get out of it? Like, what is it that we want schools to teach? What is it that we want to learn? And that, I think, is a question that's even bigger than AI, right? Because I think AI is showing us more of what we were before, diba? So if we're teaching people to memorize stuff, then the people we're producing are like people who can regurgitate information, but if they're just doing that, even the applications that they're thinking about for AI, and I think we were talking last week about, oh, there's a lot of different startups that are doing AI stuff, but probably hindi na sila matutuloy because either their idea might not be too profitable, walang actual value add, so on and so forth, right? And maybe one potential root cause of that is just like the creativity and critical thinking aspect, right? It starts at a really early age, like much earlier than people think, right? Those parang limiting beliefs and those mindsets, diba? Like when you start to think na, oh, I can't do something. And I think that also translates into learning. Because now, like learning how to learn, I think is like the key thing as compared to like learning specific tools or languages or whatever. Like those are all learnable. But if you have that like mindset, and I had to really break out of this. Parang I struggled with this personally na thinking, okay, baka hindi ko siya kaya kasi no experience or whatever. Like AI is showing us now with all of these people, like AI is somewhat new. A lot of these applications are new. Like nobody has experience, right? Like if we kind of block ourselves from learning just because we think, okay, I don't have experience, like paano na tayong lahat, diba? Like how are we gonna like move forward together? Um, so a lot of these topics related to education, I think, are focused on like the social and the cultural growth and just like trends more than the technological aspect. I think like the technological aspects is reflecting or mirroring what we've known to be true or what has been happening both socially and culturally, and it's just being exacerbated through the technology. So I think the bigger question is like how do we move forward now knowing these things? How do we use the technology not to exacerbate the things that we don't like socially and culturally, but to enable people and empower people to kind of do more, whether it's like showing them, okay, like you don't know how to code, but you can learn how to code. These are the tools that you can use. You don't know math, you can use AI as a tutor special, but then with checking, syempre, not just taking
Mm.
everything, right? But how can you use AI in that way? How can you use it as an assistant as compared to just being worried that your job will be replaced, right? So learning how to use these things together, and then like kind of having that ongoing like lifelong learning type of aspect. So any kind of last words on this topic? Maybe let's start with Carlo and then Doc.
I mean, I think that everyone in the future is gonna just have to learn three things, right? So one, communication, two, learning how to learn because everyone learns differently at different times of the day, even. And then three is being able to understand and make sense of a lot of information, right? Um, but I think, what school gives us, while you're saying all of that, it occurred to me that like what school actually gives us is like time and space to learn things at low stakes, right? So if the only repercussion is that you get a bad grade or whatever it is, right? Like, or people make fun of you, that's pretty low stakes compared to like, work. You lose money or you get fired, right? But I think, you could do that without schools. I think there's still the social value of being around other people who are in the same space as you are, like mentally and emotionally, physically, whatever. But you could recreate that virtually, and you could have like meetups for these things so people could socialize. But I do think you know schools are going to be that has to be rethought. They've gotten too big. They've gotten too much to become. They've become businesses for the most part, and not even good businesses, right? Just businesses. And I think, yeah, that has to be rethought, and hopefully, AI Republic, Amber, Doc, can solve a lot of these things either directly or indirectly.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I'm excited to be a part, and I'm excited to, be podcasting with you both and then working on the course together. What about you, Doc? Any last thoughts on this topic before we close up?
I don't think it'll be last thoughts, but where
Thoughts for
where
now.
where I'm sitting right now, which is not too far from where you guys are sitting. I mean, I it keeps me up thinking about what do we do with our place in the world, like in the Philippines. Like if we were seated in California, it's completely different discussion. The guys there are, you know, they go from frivolous shit to what do we do when we land in Mars. Ganun na sila mag-isip eh. Tayo, we have to contend with the imperfections of the way the Philippines works. A lot of it is actually, if you think of it, a lot of it is just either you're fighting for survival or you're fighting for power.
Mm,
Dalawa lang yan in the Philippines. If the majority of us are fighting for survival. When you say survival, it's not necessarily you're gonna die, but you just want to live comfortably. And if you have a family, you want your kids to live comfortably. But then for maybe at most the top 5%, it's about power. And so money conflates with power also because you need money for that. If you get out of Metro Manila, the entire country is run like a feudal society. It's like Game of Thrones everywhere else. So, and sometimes that's even easier, if you want to get anything done in region X, you just talk to the governor, who's the relative of the mayor, who's the relative of the of the councilors. They run it like a small kingdom. And by this time, the people running these places are roughly Carlo and my age. They've already passed the baton. The boomers are either dead or dying. So it's Gen X, and pretty soon it'll be your age, Amber.
ooh.
Um, so life outside NCR seems to be a bit simpler, and it's not about greed at all. They just want to propagate power, because that's how they've lived their lives. And business just feeds to that. So I don't know how to feel about that because if you want to be a bit more idealistic, yeah, sure, let's train everyone in AI, everyone gets smarter. But at some point, people get too smart, it challenges the power structures already. So it's not in the interest of the people in power for people to get too smart. And I struggle with that thought. That's just my the way I piece it together because the world is not static. So all I'm saying is, if let's say the powerful people in the Philippines want to keep everyone dumb because that propagates their power, that's not going to stop Vietnam from coming in and eating our lunch, or Kuala Lumpur, or Africa. Like Nigeria is the next Philippines na raw because they speak English. Their average age is younger than us, and they have a much bigger population, parang 200 million. So can you imagine that while we're all busy bickering with dep ed and education here, Nigeria is going to suddenly eat up all the BPO business? I struggle with that thought because it feels pathetic. Shouldn't we be thinking about what will the Philippines do when we start mining asteroids in the not so distant future? Diba? Shouldn't we be thinking of that? Or all the pathetic shit happening around us in the West Philippine Sea, Chinese ships bumping our ships. Shouldn't we just be kind of the gatekeeper to the South China Sea because that's the best use of our land? Shouldn't we be buying weapons? Yeah, I mean, that's what keeps me up. That's why I like AI, because it has the ability to level the playing field. Even if you're not a PhD, you can be much more productive than a PhD. So think of everyone in the first world. Those are the guys with PhDs, and all of us in the global south don't have PhDs. We can be as productive as them. There's sure as hell a lot more people in the global south and global north. So again, it's still about power. So maybe we'll discuss that next week, or in our next podcast. Uh, and that's one of the hardest things to reconcile. Data science. Data is power, diba? Information is power. So I feel we need to lead the path, to be a real AI republic. How do we handle power discussions responsibly and empower people, properly, not just because of they can earn more money, but they can, think better. I saw that in the hackathon. That hackathon was precisely an exercise in power. These people who don't know anything about startups, suddenly they have all of this access. Then what? Incubators come in, power pa rin eh. So anyway, maybe this is just 10 o'clock talking, but yeah, I enjoyed the chat, guys. Looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, thank you everyone so much for tuning in. I know we went a lot over time, but I did really, really enjoy this. I loved picking your brains on this. And yeah, honestly, like I just love chatting with you guys and like hearing your thoughts on AI. Super excited and grateful I can nerd out with you and have these discussions. So
I mean, maybe sorry, closing comment. You should read The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. I think it's by some Brazilian guy. But
I love Brazil.
I mean, Brazil is just like the Philippines, right? Same kind of.
yeah.
But I think really great. So pedagogy means like how you teach people. And he does like a historical view of it, plus like a societal view of it, plus the implications of like how people are being taught. And really, like you see this in a lot of the former Spanish colonies too, right? Not just the U.S. But yeah, it's a really, really interesting read to talk about all of these things. And again, like read the two Salhan books; they're so good. And yeah,
Go check it out. Is there an ebook? I'm gonna download it now.
Yeah, I'll get it also on Kindle. Honestly, I've been trying to read a lot more and just reading a lot about like AI and transformative change and all of these things. So
yeah, you could even license out a voice and have somebody read it to you on 11 Labs.
just like
Oo
read
nga, tama
old
yun. Sige.
audiobook, old
Full
audio.
circle, guys. All right, thank you, everybody.
See you guys.
One
Catch
for
you later.
joining us and see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching and listening to the AI Republic podcast. Stay tuned for more news and information on the AI space together with Carlo, Doc, and Amber. Please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell as we post the podcasts weekly.